Everyone, Bateman with PIXERA here. We just released version 26.1 R1 for PIXERA, and there's a new mapping feature in the mapping tab that I'd love to show you. Let's dive in. So I've got a project pulled up here with a couple of LED screens that I've already assigned to some outputs, and you can see those outputs running in my little pips below there. The first thing you'll notice is in the top left of the workspace, there's now an all screens option in this drop-down menu. This allows us to dive in and look at all of our feeds for all of our screens at the same time. Previously in PIXERA, you could only look at one screen object at a time, which made arranging your feeds on your outputs a little cumbersome. So now if I dive in here, we can see all of our feeds for all of our screen objects at the same time. If I select this feed here, over in the inspector, we still have our destination engine or a destination view, and we are going to call this now the warp engine. So we still have our source and destination, but now I can actually, with some pane management, I can right click in the gutter here and hit split. And I'm going to go ahead and split this horizontally. And I can now right click in this blank space for options, and you can see I can actually move the warp engine here. So now I have the ability to look at all of my screens and their feeds at the same time as I'm looking at my outputs in this destination window here. Now, this allows us to arrange our feeds a little easier without having to click around so much. So I could select this source feed here, and I could maybe make it a little smaller, and then I can jump straight to my output and move it over here. And I could grab this feed here, and I'll move that there. And I could even hit the plus button, and we can see we've added another stage left 2 feed. And so now I can move that feed, so we can start arranging these things as much as we want here. There's a lot of flexibility here, and this allows us to really just arrange these things a lot more easily without clicking around so much. Of course, the project tab with all of our mappings is still here, which is great. And so we can still access these feeds if we want to that way, but it just allows us to really navigate this much more quickly and make these decisions and lay out all of our feeds a lot easier. We have also some additional features over here, like being able to lock the source so I can't actually move that feed. And we can also lock our destination, so I couldn't move that one. In the destination window, the warp engine, there's also some new features like the labels button here, where we can actually change the labels that come up. So I can say, hey, I actually don't want to see the positions, or I don't want to see the names. And we can turn off this service structure name, which would turn off our outputs and our machine. So if I turn that back on, you can see I've got my local machine here, and it's the graphics card 1 on outputs 5 and 8. So if you had a bigger system, you would see all of those systems together, and you could navigate this workspace just like you navigate any other workspace using the middle mouse button, zoom, all that stays the same. The last feature here is this output appearance button in the top right of the warp engine now, which basically just allows us to change the gutter size on the output itself. So what that lets us do is if we had projection warping or something, that would let us actually see those warps right next to each other, which could help if we're ever doing a complicated warping project or something. Let's take a look at projectors right now. All right, so I've pulled up a projection project now, very similar layout of everything we've got going on here. But down in our destination, if I go over to the warp tab, we can now actually warp these projectors at the same time. And you can see that reflected on my output. So you don't have to click around and jump to one projector and then go over to the warp window or the warp tab and click around in that, and then maybe navigate to the project tab and find the other projector and do all that. Right now, you can actually see it all at the same time, and you can just grab your warp points and use them all at the same time. Of course, if we select the projector, we'll still be able to actually modify each of its modifiers individually. So I could add another set of FFDs, or I could change this to have 2x2 or 4x4, or however we want to do that on our actual warp points. We can also, so I can do that by clicking on the projectors up here. I can also go to this selected screen mapping to change the projectors right here. So again, hoping to alleviate some of the clicking around that you have to do previously. Now you can just have this mapping setup all laid out and do it all at the same time without having to click through a bunch of different objects and digging around for certain settings. This is where that output gutter can be really nice, because now we could bring those two warps right up next to each other if we wanted to, and we could actually see how that would look a little more nicely in our destination window. One quick limitation that I want to go over here is that it's not possible to take our output feeds and move them between outputs without actually assigning that output to that screen object. So I'll show you what I mean. If we look at our outputs on my pips, if I try and take this feed from output 5 and move it across to my other output, we won't actually see anything there. In order to get that to happen, we would actually want to go to our IO routing and take output 8, and we'd want to actually assign that to a new mapping for center stage. And now we can see that we have, go back to preview here, we now have that feed on both of our outputs. So just one limitation to keep in mind, that anywhere you want your feed to show up, you need to make sure that that feed, it has a mapping to that output. So that's the new mapping multi-view. We're really excited about it. We hope it makes things a little easier on you when you're programming, and will allow you to make all those mappings a little more efficiently when you're sitting in the hot seat. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.